our 2009 survey last year, probably the most resounding finding we came across was this really ubiquitous feeling of very pronounced pressure to improve outsourcing relationships. This was felt by something like 98% of both providers and sponsors, and particularly to improve the efficiency of these relationships, that there was a lot left on the table in terms of time and money spent with outsourced work that didn't have to be left on the table if big improvements could be made. So in 2010, the first question we asked each of our sponsors and providers was, what are you doing about it in the last year? What changes have you just made, or what changes are you currently making or are thinking about making immediately? And this slide depicts just some of the top answers that we got from our sponsor company respondents. I'm not going to read all the words there, you can read them, but they basically, the results fell into two major themes. The first major theme was that sponsors either are beginning to or are intending to consolidate a lot of their outsourced work into a smaller number of very carefully, rationally selected preferred provider relationships. And then the second major theme is that they are beginning to or intend to soon increase their investment in monitoring and managing these relationships in very systematic and formal ways to help ensure their success. We asked the same question of provider respondents, and we basically saw the same two themes: increased investment in long-term relationships, as you can see here, from increased pursuit of preferred providerships and increased pursuit of repeat business, and then also increased investment in more formal, systematic ways of monitoring and measuring these relationships. Now, the survey went into cover many of those topics listed in there in quite some detail, and talk about people's experiences with them, whether they've been positive or negative, what made them succeed. As Patty mentioned, we don't have time to go into too much of that, so we're going to focus here on how expectations of what preferred providerships entail and management of preferred providerships entail, and then on whether these more select group of more intense relationships, whether that strategy is actually achieving the desired benefit of increased quality and value of work. Now, starting here with the expectations of preferred providerships, this slide here depicts what sponsors told us. Sponsors told us in 2010 that they expected out of their preferred provider relationships in the recent past, as recent as just last year. And you can see here this blue bar represents, for each of these line items, this blue bar represents the percentage of sponsors who said that they always expected this out of any preferred provider relationship they entered. The gold bar represents the proportion who sometimes expected it depending on the relationship, and the orange bar represents the portion who just didn't routinely expect this in preferred provider relationships. And you can see that as recently as 2009, the last couple of years, the only item here that was always expected out of preferred provider relationships by the majority of sponsor respondents was discounted rates. Further down, a lot of them also expected more oversight by the provider senior management. But below that, a lot of them were, sometimes we expect it, sometimes we don't, and frequently we don't expect it at all. So those items, in case you can't read them, preferred access to specific staff members, dedicated staff, not necessarily expected formal relationship management programs, not necessarily expected formal performance measurement, not necessarily formal governance, and advice and input regarding strategic planning. Now, looking at 2010 and beyond, what sponsors told us about what they expect out of their preferred provider relationships has changed quite dramatically. At this point, almost all of these are expected always as part of every one of their preferred provider relationships by at least half of our sponsor respondents. And these proportions here in orange that just do not routinely expect these have gotten very small, have almost vanished. So these things are expected always by many, at least half of the respondents, and at least sometimes by almost all the others.